Ask everybody to be seated. Actually, could I ask you to stand and face the flag? We'll call this meeting to order. Follow me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know where the chair is at this point, but we do have a quorum, so we'll get started here. Mr. Moore, do we have someone serving in the clerk staff who could call the roll?
No, we don't.
Would
Karen, can you do that for us?
Oh, yeah, you can read it off.
If you would.
Oh, I can read it off. Thank you. Larry Soa is not here. Ken Cumberson,
Present.
Hugh Kalani,
Here.
Dave McNeil. I think he's excused. Grafton Sherling, Bill Blantis,
Here.
Barbara Kemper,
Here.
Gary Kerr,
Here.
Cindy Lewis Wolfram,
Here.
Pat Russell.
Here. Thank you very much. The first order of business is the election of chair and vice chair of the budget committee. The chair will entertain a motion for someone to chair the budget committee meeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would like to nominate Gary Kerr for chair, in as much as he was vice chair at our last budget committee meeting last year. I'd like to progress it on forward.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion for the vice chair? Barbara?
I'd like to nominate Pat Russell.
New blood.
Are you accepting her?
Did you want to participate while you got your term there?
Are you accepting or declining, Pat?
Well, my feeling is that it ought to be rotated, and I've already been chair at least once as a budget committee member, and so I'm just trying to pass it along. If no one else wants it, I'll be happy to accept it, though.
Yes.
I would like to see as vice chair someone who is a long-term member. This is my last year on the committee, and I would suggest that we ask our new member, William or Bill, if he would serve as vice chair, and perhaps get ready to serve as chair next year.
Bill, would you be willing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Barbara?
I'll
did you want-
second it.
Oh, okay, then I move, or did Cindy move?
Mm-hmm.
Would you second?
No, Cindy and Barbara.
Cindy and Barbara, moved and seconded for Mr. Blantis to be vice chair.
Larry?
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I'll take this over to Mr. Kerr. Would the clerk acknowledge that Dr. Soa is now present? For the record.
The next item on the agenda is the minutes of May 16th last year. They are in the back of the book. I presume everybody has read them. Do we have a motion to approve?
I have a question on corrections.
Okay.
Can we get a motion on the floor?
I move to approve the minutes of April 25th and May 16th.
I'll second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I believe that on the May 16th, it's a minor typographical change, but under approval minutes of May 16th, it should be April 16th, that's the motion right.
Correction agreed to.
April 26th rather, I stand corrected.
What page is that, Cindy?
That's the page 1 of 3 of the minutes of May 16th. Second item,
So it says 26.
it says approval minutes of May 16th. It should read April 26th.
25th.
Didn't we meet on the 26th?
It's
You're
the-
right, sir.
It's 26, but
April
header
20.
says 25th.
And so the next line should read, the approval of the April 25th.
5th minutes.
I didn't catch that one. Thank you.
The second accepts.
Any other discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes as changed?
Oh,
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Budget committee governance, everybody remembers what that is? Means the rules of meeting.
We're gonna turn our,
Historically, we've used Robert's minutes, discussion or changes or requests, anything different? Do we have a motion? So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, use Robert's. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimous. Next item on the agenda is public comment.
oh, Mr. Chair, before we move on, I believe we have some rules over there, those general rules of behavior. Are those still up on the board, Mr. Moore?
Yeah,
Yes, they
they're
are.
right here,
For board meetings?
Yes, and I'd like to suggest that we follow along those same general rules of behavior.
Okay, would you make a
Well,
motion to
So
that?
I would
effect?
move that we follow, in addition to Robert's rules, the rules of, what do these read? Rules of behavior,
It's board policies governing public meetings.
thank you, posted on the
North wall.
west wall.
Okay, second?
Second.
Second. Been moved and seconded, discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
One opposed, Mr. Sullivan? Anything else then before public comment? For the committee to consider? Okay, now open it for public comment. We're gonna use this place for public comment. Okay. Is any member of the public here that'd like to speak on the budget at this time? Hearing no one or seeing no one? And no one signed in, as near as I can tell. Let's move on to Carol and have her present the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Starting off just with the budget message for fiscal year 2014-2015. We did make the budget available to the committee members on April 25th. And so I'm starting off with a summary of the total budget. We now have 7 funds instead of 6. We have added the Clackamas Regional Water Supply Commission Activity Fund and have the wholesale water purchases from Sunrise flowing through this activity fund. So our total budget for this fiscal year is $22,890, or $22,899,000, compared with last year of $21,762. So we are up by a little over $1 million. But if you look at our expenditures, the actual money that we plan to spend, the budget for this fiscal year is down by $373. Those first numbers that I showed you include beginning fund balance and ending fund balance, so that's why the number tends to be larger. So just looking at the expenditure side of the picture without transfers and without the ending fund balance, it's a much smaller number. And in fact, this budget is down over the prior year, primarily due to CIP funding. The projects that we have on our current year proposed list have a lower cost than the projects we had on last year's list. So when we talk about resources, in accounting we use a lot of terms that normal people don't use. And so when we talk about resources, we've got water rate revenue, we've got service connection fees, we've got miscellaneous operating, we have rental income, we have earnings from investments, basically the interest earnings on the cash that we hold in the bank. miscellaneous non-operating, and one of the things in there that we've included in there are some revenues that we get from our IGAs with Sunrise Water Authority, and those will be going through the activity fund, the CRWIC activity fund, and then we have grant funding. We don't have any grant funding in this proposed budget, but we do, we're hopeful, we're anticipating that we might get some actual physical assets donated to us. Those we don't count in on the resources because it's not a cash expenditure for us. So we also, in the resources, it includes our beginning fund balance and any transfers in. On the expenditure side, I'd like to point out that we have not changed any of the staffing, except for a little moving around. We've moved the records management admin coordinator into the finance, accounting, and customer service department. So that department's up one, and the general administration department is down one, but the total staffing is the same. When we look at the cost for our personnel services, we're down by $3,500, and that's primarily due to a reduction in the PERS amount that we have to pay, and that was changed after we did the budget last year by Senate Bill 22. But we also have some anticipated increases in our medical and dental coverage for our employees, and we do have some employees that are still eligible for step increases. We're currently in the middle of negotiations with the labor union, so we haven't put in a dollar amount for raises within, you know, making a projection for each individual position, but we could foresee, depending upon how the negotiations come out, that there might be some increases there. If you look at the materials and services expenditures for CRW, one of the things that we've been really following closely over the years and communicating to the budget committee is that a significant portion of our expenditures in materials and services are externally mandated. So we have costs that we are required to incur so that we can meet federal and state regulations and just things to operate the district. We can't choose to stop paying the electric bill, for example, and that's a pretty significant portion of our budget. So the external mandates are about 62% of the total cost in the materials and services budget. We also have internal mandates, and those are things that comply with our operational policies, with board policies, and so we've included costs for those internal mandates as well, and that's another 26%. So the remainder of that budget, that materials and services budget, which is, I have that number right here in front of me, is that's kind of our discretionary budget, is about $480,000. So, and most of those things are also best practices. We comply with, you know, AWWA best practices rules, with accounting rules, those kinds of things. So even those, they're not just kind of at a whim. We're complying with industry rules and professional rules that are out there. We also have customers out there that have an expectation. They want to be able to pay their bill with a credit card. For that, we incur an expense. And again, with this budget year, as we did last year, we included decision packages. And these are for one-time items, but they could also be a new initiative that we are putting into place. And so we'll talk about those in more depth when we get into the general fund. And finally, we have capital outlay, which is not an operating expense. Capital outlay by its nature tends to be one-time, although we do have a few things that are recurring. We replaced the SCADA server. We have dual servers. We replace one every year. The goal is to ensure that we always have a SCADA server that's working so that we can monitor what's going on in the system and at the plant.
We have a new member here, so you might want to talk about what SCADA is and some of the acronyms that are
Thank you.
I will let Rob say the name of SCADA.
Okay, it's an acronym for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And it's how we communicate out with the system, and it communicates back with us and how we log our data.
the town.
So it's the nerve center of the treatment side.
Gather information.
So in our capital outlay, we've got a proposed budget that includes 9 items, and it's $406,000, which is a significant increase over the prior year. Last year, we budgeted $209,000. One thing that's in there that we haven't seen in quite a while is a vehicle replacement. And in your board packet, again, when we talk about the general fund, you'll see kind of the details of what we're including. We have a 5-year plan for capital outlay, so you can see what we've got in this year's plan as well as what we anticipate in the next 4 years. But I think our newest vehicle is a 2008 vehicle that was purchased in 2007. So, you know, we've kept the vehicles, we've taken care of the vehicles, but you come to a point in time when it's time to replace one. So again, we'll discuss the capital outlay in more detail when we talk about the general fund. The other thing that we used in developing our budget, besides looking at those external mandates that we really had little control over, is we have been working closely with the board on some of the board priorities. And so we do have some costs involved in this, included in this budget, that are related to those board priorities. And one of those priorities is to develop the good working relationship with other water providers in the region. And to that end, we have signed the ORS 190 and created the Clackamas Regional Water Supply Commission. And they have a budget that was approved by their budget committee, and that budget should be adopted. We anticipate it will be adopted on May 12th. Now that budget, besides their budget committee, had to come to the Sunrise Board and to the CRW Board and get approvals at those places as well. So it's been scrutinized through the commission and the 2 individual boards, and will be in front of the CRWSC board on the 12th. Another priority of the board is to update the strategic plan for the district and to ensure that our operation plans are kind of aligned with that strategic plan. So we do have some costs in this budget associated with that. And then also identifying short and long-term capital projects. And coming up in the agenda, we will be talking about the capital projects, but these 3 listed are certainly projects that have been discussed with the board and that are a high priority for the CRW board. The other thing that we've done, I believe it was April of 2013, the CRW board approved financial reserve policies. And we are working towards meeting those policies. And a couple of them, we've got them, we've nailed them. We've got the $500,000 contingency we have had for quite a while. And it seems to be an appropriate amount. It's been able to help us when we have run into unforeseen costs throughout the year. And the general fund, beginning fund balance, the policy is to hold a 90-day operating cost in the general fund beginning balance, so that before we collect any money from our customers, we can cover our costs. Per the policy, based on this year's operating budget, it should be $1,919,000. The forecast for this budget is that we will have a beginning fund balance of $2,405. Or is that an ending fund balance? I may be misspeaking. That's the ending fund balance. The third leg of this is the transfer to the capital reserve, and you can think of that as the savings account. We need to move money from the general fund, which is primarily ratepayer money. 97% of our revenues are from water rates, and we need to move some of that money into the savings account so that we are able to do the capital projects that we need to do to maintain the system. And the range of that is from $500,000 to $1,750,000. In this budget year, we have budgeted or proposed $1,250,000. So we're starting to get close to that number. We did $500,000 for, I think, 3 years, the first 3 years that I was here, and we were spending more than that out of that capital reserve fund. So we were operating at a deficit in that capital reserve fund, as well as we normally use system development charges, which is in our NCC reserve fund, and the revenues coming in there have not been sufficient, so as we use it, that fund balance is going down. So here's a chart that I know the board members have seen, and this is showing what is going on with our reserves. And the goal is to get the reserves kind of back up there towards the 2009-10 level. And the board has just approved an 8-year rate plan, and so as we proceed through that plan, we should see the reserve balances coming up. Again, the reason it's going down is because we've spent money on capital improvement projects. And if you actually look at the total that we've spent over this time period, we have spent more than the reduction in those funds. So, you know, we are being prudent, but, you know, the reserves have still gone down.
But did we use some of the reserve funds back in the 08 and 09 years as a support of rates at that point?
We did. It was in the, I believe fiscal 10 and 11, we did use rate stabilization money, which is a reserve. And we did not use as much as we thought we were going to have to, which was good news, but we did use, I think, $600,000 one year, and $644,000 one year, and $500,000 the next year.
And so this, going back up, is going to be in a position to support us should we find ourselves in that position again.
Yes, as I've looked at what the reserves are and looked at the forecast going out into the future, looking at capital improvements and the potential for borrowing money to do some of the larger projects, at that point in my forecast, I foresee adding to the rate stabilization fund. A rate stabilization fund is money that's put aside so that if your revenues don't come in where you expect them to, for example, if it rained all summer and people did not have to water their gardens, then our revenue would be lower than we anticipated. And should it come in low enough that it doesn't meet our debt covenants, we could utilize money from that rate stabilization fund to meet the debt covenants.
As a couple of the board members who were here then might remember, there was a general misunderstanding of what a rate stabilization fund was about. Getting us back on track.
Kind of like a Civil War here.
One of the reasons why I asked the question was so that we thoroughly understood it and that we could make sure any new members would also be aware of it as we go on.
Well, in final analysis, and for several years you take money out of the bucket, at some point in time you have to put money back into the bucket. Not discussing why it came out, that's not the point, it's just that you have to refill the bucket at some point in time.
Well, there were some past thoughts that the rate stabilization fund was to stabilize the rates that we charged our customers and not as a reserve account for revenue shortfall. So there's a big difference.
Yeah.
That's another question where, my question is, why have two different reserve funds? Why don't you just put it into one reserve fund and be done with it?
We are required to keep the system development charges reserves separate.
Right, okay.
That's
Yeah, I
required by
understand
law. And we really don't need a fund for rate stabilization. That's the way it has been set up. It could be a line item in the general fund budget, but to be able to qualify for meeting those debt covenants, it has to be isolated. So we can't just say, we're gonna use some of the money from the capital reserve fund. So we do need to isolate it, but it could be a reserve line item in the general fund, or it can be a separate fund.
Plus, it allows the board to establish specific policies around each strain of money. About 6 or 7 years ago, for those of you who were here, it used to be in a pool, and we then began to divide it up a little bit so that the board sets policies around each, and that's easier for the board then to keep staff accountable for managing each of those funds separately.
It was just good.
One of the other reasons, major reasons, is the fact that the general fund is the driver for the rates. And when all those other things are in there, it has a tendency to keep the rates higher than necessary. But it also does the transparency, so that there's a conscious decision on the part of the board to do these things rather than have it vary all in one place. And that was the reason for the original split in the first place.
And just out of curiosity, Carol, what were those ratios this year when you did your numbers in September? Do you happen to have those?
I don't have it in front of me. I brought a budget. I did not bring a
Okay, just curious.
packet. But we met the debt covenants nicely, and I do have something in the presentation to show where we expect to be at the end of this year,
Thank you.
of this budget year that we're proposing.
Thank you very much.
I did want to point out this blue right here, that's the rate stabilization fund. So you can see it's getting a little bit bigger just from interest earned here, but this is where we spent it down and spent it down. Oh, here we go. So here's the debt covenants. And
Thank you.
for those that don't know, the debt covenants are calculated, we have two different ratios that we need to meet. When we include the revenue from the system development fund, then we have to meet it by a 1.21 ratio, meaning if your debt is $100, you have to have the difference between your revenues and expenses of $125. Without the SDC revenue, you have to have a 1-to-1 ratio. So again, if your debt's $100, you need to have your revenues minus your expenses, operating expenses, equal to $100. So that not only are you paying the debt, but you've got that money available to make sure that you can cover it. That makes the bondholders happy. So what we've got now, based on this budget, with the operating revenue, or the gross revenues, the operating expenses, and our forecasted SDC revenues, we should be at a 3.65 and a 3.41.
Highest we've been in several years?
In several years, yes. I think,
Not the highest we've been.
yeah, it has been higher. We are having all of our financials looked at, and this budget looked at, and the 8-year rate plan looked at by a financial analyst who works for one of the bonding funds. And she will be submitting our new and improved information to the rating agencies. And we're hopeful that we can get an upgrade of our rating, outstanding debt, before we go to the market.
So I assume that being more than twice as frugal as is required at the bare minimum, which is 1.25, that should sweeten the pot for the bonding companies and help us get a lower rate
Yes,
than being right at the line.
right. They look at a lot of different features, but this is certainly one of them. If you're right at the 1.0, 1.25, they're not going to look at you very favorably. The other thing that I think will be a big benefit to the board, or to the district, is the long-term planning that we've been doing. And they look to that very favorably as well. They say, you know where you are, you have a plan for where you want to go, and that's a good thing to them. It demonstrates a lot of stability, which also demonstrates that we will likely be able to pay back the bonds. So that basically covers the budget message. I really do want to thank all of the managers that have contributed time and energy and effort, and all of the staff that assisted in preparing the budget document. I think that we've got a really good budget document, and hopefully there's a lot of information in there that can be helpful to you in reviewing this and making decisions. And I would like to thank the CRW board members and the citizen committee members as well for your time and energy that you've put forward in this year's budget process. And we're going to take a little break now, so we do have cookies, we've got coffee and water, and we're going to set up for the CIP presentation, which is the next item on the agenda. Oh, we do have public comment.
Yeah, the next item is public comment. Pull the dick break.
I'm still seeing no public, so.
Is there any
But
public
if anybody-
here to make comments today? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a 5-minute break.
I'm just, you know, we don't always get a chance to say that. Like he said.
Yeah, they're way above.
Yeah, so I mean, that.
Whatever it's worth.
The chair has told us back.
Excuse me.
Quarter mile.
It's serious. I heard that.
It wasn't the chair.
Then you should 3 more to go.
Just,
Your,
we call the meeting back to order with a comment, on page 11. I didn't want to interrupt before, while she was making her presentation, but, you notice the $500,000 contingency item. Last time that was used in Major Way was 96 when we had the fund. And it was nearly 700,000. I just put that in so that it's on the record, so that it's not 20 years old anymore, but it's something that we have, noticed on the record currently, so.
And since I've been here, we did use 300,000 for the Holly Lane. The
Yes.
slide
Yeah.
Holly Lane, so we did use it for that.
Yep. So, just some commentary on that.
Looking at it another way, if it was it 2008 or 9, we were at about $12 million overall reserves. And we're hoping to get to that at the end of the 8 years of our rate situation. And if you figure in that there's been a certain amount of inflation, that $12 million at the end of the 8 years is not going to purchase what it did,
I don't think so.
15 years before.
That's correct. Any other comments before we turn to Adam?
Are we all set?
How's that?
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm going to stand if that's okay. I'll try to project and not talk too fast. I have a tendency to do that when I'm up doing presentations. Engineering manager with CRW. I work alongside Bob George, district engineer, and our engineering department. Kind of our focus tonight, of course, is, well, my focus is the CIP program. I wanted to take an opportunity to present that to you formally. Some of this information may be reviewed to you, but we wanted to at least briefly touch on a few things, starting with some concepts with CIPs, and then get right into the meat of the program for this 14-15 fiscal year. So just a brief outline of what we'll be talking about tonight. And again, just our focus will be primarily in the projects. We'll get into those and talk about each one at a certain length, but again, I don't want to take too much time. I know we're on a timeline tonight. So, and then if your questions don't get answered, feel free to interrupt me as I go along. If your questions don't get answered, or you want more information, I encourage you to read in the budget write-up. We have narratives on each project, and if that still doesn't tickle or scratch the itch, we can present more information at a later time if that's so desired. So, moving right along, wanted to start with just a district overview map, just a picture of the district. Most of you have seen this. We've got them all over the place. North service area, all one district, of course, but Clackamas River is kind of the natural border. The north service area and the south service area, primarily rural in the south, southeast of Oregon City and east of Oregon City, and then up in the northern area we're kind of sandwiched between Happy Valley, Gladstone, Milwaukee, and Portland. Just the main infrastructure, all the red lines are main transmission lines, water transmission. Anything 12 inches or larger, I think is what we've got on there, 12-inch diameter. Maybe a couple of 8s or 10s. And then, if you look at figure 1 in your packet, I did print you 11x17 of this as well for your ease of viewing. And we have all the major facilities, whether pump stations, reservoirs, treatment plant. A few of our neighbors' facilities are on there as well for your info. So what is a capital improvement? And what is a CIP, or capital improvement program? Again, the definitions, they can kind of fit really any municipality, any entity that has infrastructure and needs to make improvements, either short-term or long-term, ongoing maintenance and improvements to the facilities. Construction that extends the life of an asset. It's kind of like the way I like to think about it. A capital improvement program then is really for the district. It's something that is identifying, prioritizing, coordinating, and funding projects to meet infrastructure needs, improving infrastructure. So talking about our capital planning, what goes into those plans? It is a ongoing process. It's a cyclical process. We build off of years and years of data. That data is always changing as we find either new needs or find new deficiencies with our existing facilities, whether it's a water line that's getting old or a pump station that needs electrical upgrades or a treatment plant that needs some treatment changes to meet new regulations. So as you can see, as far as evaluation criteria goes, we look at all sorts of things, from hydraulics to boundaries, whether there's some sort of external mandate at stake, if the county or the state has a project that may be affecting how we have to address a certain facility or a water line, what have you. What comes out of the criteria and evaluation is really our list of projects, and that typically for us is it's a 10-year plan. We do kind of plot both sides of that, where we look shorter term, 5 years out, 10 years kind of the middle, and then on into 20 years, which is really talking about our master plan. For a master plan, we get into the 20-year plan, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the end result is, how do we prioritize those projects? You know, why do we have the 9 projects we do in this year's CIP list? And I'll get into that. So master planning. Generically, a master plan is a few things, and these are just kind of definitions or parts of the whole that I came up with, but it's a product of the capital planning process, again, as I described to you. A detailed process that looks at a bunch of evaluation criteria to identify deficiencies, identify needs in the system. It's required by the state. Oregon Health Authority requires every 10 years that you update your capital plan or your master plan. It's a summary of your overall system needs. Really a great resource for us as we look at, again, long-term planning. Talks about all our facilities. You know, it's again a foundation that we utilize for going forward and identifying problems with the system. And it's a foundation for annual budget, why we're here today. Our master plan is, again, it's an ongoing process. It was for CRW after we merged with Claremont back in 96, 95. 1998, we issued a master plan, and that was a 20-year plan for $56 million. 2005, it was updated for another 20-year plan of $33 million. 2015, just around the corner here, there's another update required by the state. We'll be preparing that update in-house and looking to publish that sometime next year. And then again, there will always be updates to the master plan. So here's the list. Really a snapshot in time. Here we are looking at fiscal year 14-15. We have 9 projects on the list. Again, I'm going to go through each one of these, so I won't read down the list. But what I wanted to point out was, as Carol mentioned earlier, a couple key criteria are, is a project externally mandated, or is it an internal mandate or an internal priority? There's a lot of reasons why those may fall into one of the other categories. As you can see, we have over half of our projects proposed for this year are externally mandated. And as I go through each project description, you'll see why. So I think that number matches what Carol had there, hopefully what you have in your booklet. Another map of the district, this time, this is figure 2, which I also printed in the larger size for you. This one shows just the projects that we're proposing for FY 14-15. So as you can see, pretty much the red lines or red boxes are areas that designate where a CIP project for this coming fiscal year is located. We've got projects all the way up almost to the northernmost edge of the district and pretty far south as well. I'll jump back and forth for that if we need to. And again, you have the figures there. So the first project is kind of a generic placeholder. I'm not going to discuss this one at any great length, but it's our, again, it's our placeholder for externally mandated projects by either ODOT or the county, transportation development, sometimes cities, that we don't have on the radar for whatever reason, and we learn about during the fiscal year. We, with our county and state contacts, we try to maintain as much clarity and communication as possible, but there's always projects, it seems like, that sneak in, that come up on their radar that we don't know about. So what this is, it's a $125,000 placeholder for projects that have typically a common theme. You have a lot of road work out there. It may just be resurfacing, drainage work, storm work, putting in sidewalks or curbs, depending on who's doing it. This is a nice placeholder for that. We may not use it, but history shows that that number, that dollar value, is based on what we've experienced in the past. And it's nice to have a placeholder there for the unknown. The next project, and going forward now, I'll do a slide of each one that shows a brief description and then a map. So this project is an ongoing project. I think you're all familiar with the Sunrise JTA, the Jobs and Transportation Act project. Federal highway dollars, ODOT running this project. Right up here, Highway 212, just north of there, they're putting in the new 2-lane expressway. So it impacts a number of our facilities. Here's a map showing the project extents from I-205 over here to the west, all the way down east to 125th. As you can see, all the arrows designate and all the shaded areas show you areas that we have conflicts. The state went through a long planning process on this, and actually it's been pretty good to work with. Several years back, we were able to work with them to identify conflict areas. And initially, the list was, I think, 50-some potential conflicts with our water utilities. It got trimmed down to just these few. Their plans changed a little bit too, to kind of help that. The project this year, this fiscal year, we've actually done some work on it. I should say the current fiscal year, 13-14, we're anticipating more work done by the end of June, and that's why the dollar value that I showed you in the previous slide is so small, $47,000. So I think the completion date, Bob, you correct me, but I think the completion date for the overall job is towards the end of 15 or even into 16. Okay. So they've got a bit of work to do yet. If you're familiar with the area, you can see them laying roadway as far as base rock and clearing areas, but they're not paving yet. So they have some relocations to do, importantly being our water lines, a number of locations where they'll be relocating our water lines. So. Next project is another one that's been...
question?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Longfield Road up to Mather, has that been settled out okay with the district?
That project is completed.
Okay,
Yep.
they call that, they claim that part of the JTA Sunrise, but, okay, I just was curious if it's...
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because we've heard both stories. That it initially was not part of the JTA, but then after the fact, oh yeah, that is, okay. Well, we got it done. We relocated, really was not much of an impact on us. It was last fiscal year, this current fiscal year, I should say. And it was a pretty small, I think about $70,000 worth of relocation on that. Harbor Bridge, it's another one that's been ongoing for a few years. The county's rebuilding Harbor Bridge, and that was an opportunity for us, and we learned of it a number of years ago, to accomplish a goal or a need that was identified in our master plan at that point to improve distribution of CRW water to the south side. So as that bridge is being completed now, water line is actually delivered on site. We have a contract with, or we don't have a contract, we have an agreement with the county who has their bridge contractor installing our water pipe on the bridge.
So that works like for any other projects, either Clackamas River Water actually does the work, or if the state does it, or the county does it, we reimburse them for the move, or?
In this case, this is a new water line being constructed across the bridge. We did not have a water line there previously. So this is more of an opportunity for us to bring a water line across the Carver Bridge. The other ones, like the JTA that I just mentioned, that would be more strictly a relocation type project because of a roadway, a new roadway coming through.
Okay, who does the physical work, though? Who is the state do
I
that?
didn't mention that, I apologize. On the JTA, I'm gonna go back a couple slides. The majority of the work, and I had it there, in this case, where we need to relocate our water lines, is being reimbursed by the state. For
About half.
about half, okay,
About half.
I'm rounding up, I guess. So it's, that's not always the case, unfortunately. On county projects, if we're in the county right of way, by statute, we have to move our stuff. If they say move it, and we pay for that, yes.
Okay.
So the 47,000, is that our portion of that cost?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, Bob, why don't you give me a little, shed a little light there, because.
It's just real quick, because it's a multiple fiscal year project, we did a phase, what was design only, and it was $135,000 of engineering work. And then it came down to when they did the project, our portion of the reimbursement was about $185,000. It was $235 at one time. Anyway, the number, meaning that we've already made that deposit in last fiscal year. So we paid the state and they hold the money while the work is being done. That's part of the ODOT rules. So that was part of last fiscal year. This fiscal year, what we have is management money to oversee the construction and in-house labor. So that's why that number is a bit smaller. It's for our engineers for field inspection, oversight of management, and our own in-house staff work. And that's what that'll cover. And then we'll probably see another similar number for the year after that for similar management.
And the money they're holding
Is
will
for-
go out to pay stuff, or will come back to us at the end of the project?
Don't plan on any money coming back. It
Hey, I
is,
gotta ask.
it is a bid project. Okay, so they, working with the contractor, will build the water line. We get to inspect our work. We get to control the quality through ODOT and management, because we team with that. So they will use those money to pay the contractor. The contractor did bid through the state. We piggybacked with the state on design and management of the group. It was more affordable for us to do that than try to have multiple engineers and different construction groups out there. So we piggybacked or did a phase schedule through the ODOT contract for the construction. And that's been going on for almost a year now. And we got 2 more years to go.
Thank you.
So essentially, each one of these projects may require a different method of contracting and a different agreement, because they're not all created equal. And then you have to worry about whether or not it's a county project versus a state project. But in any event, whenever we're in the right of way, and it's in our best interest to lose those lines.
So the budgeted 47,000 then is for the in-house stuff?
Yes.
That's unforeseen, that something pops up, you can deal with it?
It's not unforeseen, it's more in-house labor, inspection costs. We'll go out on the job, do project inspection, we'll manage with ODOT in
And
space.
you come up with that figure from past experience?
Yes.
Okay.
We utilize the same estimating for this type of project. Okay, so Carver Bridge then, jump to a picture there.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
You saw that original master plan from 1998, where it was $56 million. $8 million of that was to drill under the Clackamas River to get the water across.
Is that pipeline B?
That's pipeline B.
Okay.
That was an $8 million project in that 98 master plan. It's now down to, I don't know what the total is for getting those lines in there, but it's way less than $8 million. Get across the river.
Yeah, and this is, again, I'm not positive what the route that they projected in the 98 master plan. I know there were a couple that they were looking at, either a bore, completely under the river, which is quite expensive, the directional drill. I know there were some different scenarios that were looked at in that. So, but yeah, this is, we're able to take advantage of, like Bob said, piggybacking on a contract, this time with the county. Clackamas County this is their bridge project, and they were willing to put a bid schedule in the documents for our water line work as an alternate schedule. So when they awarded it, that included the work to install the water line. This project,
Just for Bill's benefit, would you explain the connections on that, please?
I'm sorry, the connections?
That water line going across the bridge?
Yes.
Will connect with Sunrise and
Correct.
eventually up through Redlands and all of that.
Yeah, and I will get into that. It happens that a couple projects that we have after this will be, but I'll go ahead and explain it real briefly. So you can kind of get a picture of it. I'm going to jump ahead, so bear with me. So Carver Bridge is here at the top of the picture, the purple line. Again, the shaded part of the drawing is CRW district. So we have existing infrastructure throughout this kind of southeast portion of the district. But before the Carver Bridge completion, we did not have a CRW water line across the river. This gives us that opportunity, and it also gives us the opportunity to improve the distribution and transmission of water on this side of the district. So these other projects that I'll talk about in a bit could be thought of as additional phases from the Carver Bridge, which is really paving the way to make these improvements to the distribution system. What Ken was just speaking to, the Redland pressure zone, the pinkish shading, has some deficiencies with pressure and flow, where bringing in a larger transmission main on this eastern backbone of the system will greatly help the hydraulics out there. So there are certainly a couple of parts to the whole. So again, I'm going to back to Carver. So as I said, the Carver project is underway because of scheduling issues with the county and their contractor. They've had a number of scheduling issues that have pushed the project way back on its timeline. I think the original bid was February of 2011, and then they had a year delay because of the in-water work window and a couple of other delays. So we're kind of at the mercy of the county schedule, waiting for our water line to get in. So that's why this project is on this year's budget again. We had anticipated it being complete FY 13-14. Unfortunately, we're going to push it ahead again into 14. Bell Avenue, jumping up to the north side of the district. This is a project that's an external mandate. The county came to us last summer and shared 3 projects, the next 3 I'll talk about, that they had in their plans to construct varying degrees of roadway improvements that would all affect our water lines. Bell Avenue is up just east of Milwaukee. This is a portion of Bell that is between King and Johnson Creek. The big red line there. We have an 8-inch cast iron water main on Bell that, due to the county's improvements, they're going to be putting in sidewalks and curbs and storm drains, basically along that whole alignment, making certain improvements along that whole alignment. So what that means is we're going to have to relocate our water line from the west side of the road where it resides now to the east side of the road. So it's about 2,600 feet of line. We will upgrade it. It'll stay an 8-inch. There's no hydraulic need to increase the size out there, either now or futuristically. It will be ductile iron, so that will be an improvement. The existing line is 8-inch cast iron, 1960s era, really 50s? Early 50s era. No real leakage problems with the line, so if the county wasn't going in, we wouldn't have done anything with it. But be that as it may, this is one of those external mandates that we have to move our line. We cannot leave the line in place through the construction, through the improvements on the roadway. That would pose some real issues for us to get in there in the future and have to make improvements to that line in the event that it does leak in the future.
I have a question on the project.
Yes.
Have you approached the Urban Renewal Agency in the county? This is the North Revitalization Urban Renewal Area. I'm paying taxes on that, by the way. I'm not in the urban renewal area, but every property owner in the county is paying a property tax on that neighborhood. I'm wondering whether or not any of the public funds could be supplemented through the revitalization or renewal dollars as a way of basically giving back to CRW to knock down that construction price, even if it's a 20–30% reduction. I would encourage the staff, the administrator, and the board to seriously think about that, because there's a lot of improvements going on in Bell. Most of those are being paid by county taxpayers. These property owners are not paying for all those improvements. They are paying for certain sewer improvements, but they're not paying for all those street improvements that I'm aware of. So to me, what we're doing is we're making an area with an opportunity for increased density in the future, not a lot, and it could also it's pretty well developed out, but there's a lot of parcels that could be doubled up in density. May not be divided, but they can certainly add another unit. And I'm sure that our Urban Renewal Agency staff are planning for that subtle increase in density, whatever that may be. And to me, you know, I think the district should be getting some money out of that, cut our costs down.
We have talked to the county initially. We always ask the question when a project like this comes in, where's the funding coming from, and is there a chance for reimbursement? We were told on this one, at least from what's funding this project, the roadway improvement, it's CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds, not eligible for reimbursement for utilities to move. So,
You sure that's all Community Development Block Grant dollars and not urban renewal dollars?
that's what we've been told.
I wonder about that in my mind, dealing with our county staff. But anyway, I just make that as a general comment, because there's going to be other projects in this area that are looking for upgrades, and I think if there are public improvements that are being subsidized by countywide taxpayers, that the participating districts, agencies, should be able to benefit from that as well. I know that the sewer district, the cost for the sewering this area is being subsidized by the Urban Renewal District, Urban Renewal Agency, and at a certain percentage. I don't know what that is.
So that's going to be coming off. It's coming off, though.
No, I'm saying the property owners are getting a deal.
Right.
They're not paying 100% for those sewer easements, sewer line improvements. And I seriously kind of question the street improvements as well, that they're getting, that it's all community development block grant federal dollars. But nevertheless, they are not paying 100% for those capital improvements going into that area. So they are benefiting from dollars coming in from outside their neighborhood to improve their neighborhood. So I'm just saying that as a water district payer and a county taxpayer that, you know, maybe the water district could use a little bit of subsidy to bring in a higher level of service there, that we're being asked as ratepayers to upgrade our services to that area. So
Yeah,
who pays?
Very good point.
Worth a phone call.
I do know that, I think on the NCRA projects, wasn't there a tiny portion that was, of that work that was, okay, I don't want to misspeak. That was urban renewal, Mr. Russell. The next project is Tolbert Bridge. This is another county project. This is one that's been a few years in the making. They've kind of gone back and forth with, we're gonna fund it, we're not gonna fund it. They finally committed to funding an overpass between Camp Whitcomb and the new Minuteman Way, which is the old industrial way, up over across the train tracks onto Tolbert and essentially to 82nd Drive. 205 is over here. What that means, again, is we have, CRW has some water lines in that area that we don't want to have to go in however many years from now and dig around under 20 feet of fill and a bridge above it. So we have some options to relocate and improve the lines in that area. We have a 12-inch main that runs right along Tolbert and will be right in the way of the west side of the bridge. So the plan is to abandon that portion of the line, loop it under the bridge arch or tunnel where 94th Avenue lies, bring it around Church Street and then up north on 93rd and tie it back into Tolbert. So it'll be a relatively short section of line that will upgrade as a 12-inch. The whole thing will be a 12-inch diameter line. So there will be a bit of a hydraulic improvement on that, the benefit to that area. 407,000 estimated on that project. And it's about 1,100 feet of water line.
Are you upgrading the size of the pipe or maintaining the same size?
The size of the pipe will be upgraded, a portion of it will be, yes. Yep.
Another question here.
Yes.
Since this is a Sunrise Corridor funding, this was the extra dollars that the state saved on phase one. I think it's $30 million that they saved. My question then here is, are we getting any benefit out of that expense as we are in the Sunrise Corridor? Any shared expenses there?
Not on this piece of it. We did ask that question of OBEC, who's involved with the bridge design, who's ODOT's engineer on the Sunrise Corridor. So unfortunately,
The county's the lead agency on this, aren't they, as far as
yes.
planning and construction?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
They are partnering with OBEC engineers.
It's been my understanding that the urban renewal money that has gone into the projects within the CRC has been those agencies that have had monies come out of their tax bases or held in their tax bases over the past 20 years. Those are the agencies that are getting funds to go back, and we don't have a tax basis within the urban renewal district. I doubt that we would be beneficiaries of some of those monies going back.
Nor does the sewer district. The sewer district isn't a taxing agency either, but they are being subsidized. Your sewer bills subsidizing.
Our sewer bills, and C, whatever it's called, is subsidizing that, but that's not the urban renewal money. I'm talking just straight urban renewal money.
No, the urban renewal dollars are subsidizing the sewer line improvements. That North Revitalization area is a
Separate
local
unit.
improvement district process, but it's being subsidized by the Revitalization Urban Renewal Agency District, okay? So the sewer lines are being subsidized for that neighborhood. Water lines aren't.
Right.
I'm just trying to make a point here.
We need to have to move
Good
on.
point. Good point.
They can check it out for us.
Got it written down. Phone call.
The last project, that is an externally driven project, but hooray, it's an opportunity for CRW. This is not one of those really that is a go move your lines. This is, again, an opportunity project for us, is the Monterey Avenue extension. The county is proposing to extend Monterey Avenue from 82nd Avenue all the way over to Fuller Road, just town center right there. So they're going to put in a 2-lane road, similar to what they did a few years ago on Monterey to the east of 82nd. It'll be a concrete roadway, small bridge over Phillips Creek here in the middle. We don't have any lines that go east to west in that corridor. We do have water lines to the north and south that cross east to west. What this gives us is an opportunity to improve hydraulics in that area by improving our looping of the system. So what we're proposing is putting in a 12-inch water main, connecting it on our 10-inch line on 82nd, and running it to our 16-inch line on Fuller, and improving delivery of water in that system through that. So again, it's an opportunity project, one that would result in some substantial savings if we were to construct it now, as opposed to going back in the future and cutting up a nice concrete road and then having to repave it to put in our water line. So again, it's an opportunity. Has a cost, $361,000 we're estimating, but again, that cost is significantly less than what it would be to do it after the fact. And I just met with the county today on this one, and their schedule is building that this coming spring of 15. So about a year from now, they're going to build that. Moving back to the south side, and some of the earlier discussion, Carver Bridge and improving service to the south area. The next two projects are preliminary design projects, where we are proposing to fund survey work to survey an alignment for Butterfield Lane and Hatton Road, both transmission mains that will again improve distribution in the south area, namely the Redland pressure zone. So we would hire a surveyor to come out, and Butterfield is this segment here, the green line. From our Redland reservoirs, we have a existing easement through Mr. Butterfield's property along his private road. We would take that transmission main down to Potter and run it down and connect it to our lines on Redland. It would probably be a 16-inch, maybe larger transmission main. Greatly relieve some pressure and flow issues that we have out there right now. Hatton, again, it's the same drawing, but on the north piece, again, Hatton Road would connect to Carver Bridge, where we will soon complete the line across Carver, and construct a new transmission main all the way down Hatton Road. I think it's about 2.5 miles.
Something like that.
Of transmission main, significantly increased in size. The existing lines out there range anywhere from 4-inch to 8 on Hatton Road. And again, it would be to the effect of really making a more robust backbone on the eastern and southern piece of the district. These were all kind of strategized in early master planning, years ago. How do we improve hydraulics on the southern service area? Another piece of this is a redundant source and supply, where right now we have one source to the south side through South Fork Water Board. This would give us a secondary source and give us more resilience for water services on the south side. So those are those two projects. They're kind of partner projects. We're hopeful that if we can get some preliminary design work done this coming fiscal year, then we'd be poised to move into construction the following fiscal year on one or both of those.
Question.
Yes.
I assume sometime tonight we're going to talk about the 190 organization. Is this tied into going through SWA jurisdiction? In other words, that planning horizon being timed with your planning for these two major transmission mains. In other words, the water is going to have to come from north of the river, right?
From Sunrise.
Yeah.
Right.
So are you contemplating timing this? If you're going to go out and build a water line out in a rural area, are you going to time it to connect to a live water at the same time? Or?
I didn't mention, but we do have a phase one of the project is a short connection just north of the Carver Bridge that connects to the Sunrise Water Authority's 12-inch transmission main.
There is a water line in place. in
Yes.
other words. It's just
Yeah, it's-
negotiating the connection.
Correct. It's to be built in the next month. It will be completed this current fiscal year. We have it contracted and ready to be constructed.
One follow-up question, is that 12-inch, is it capacity for what you want to do on the south end?
For now, yes.
Okay,
We are putting an 18-inch line across the bridge.
right.
So we have the potential to, increase flow and get plenty of water across the bridge.
Then one last request that I have, because I will be on this committee a couple more years, hopefully. I think it's time we need to show the designated rural reserves that were approved by Metro and sent to the state for adoption, although the court kind of screwed things up along with the legislature, so I don't know the status of those, but I think it's time that we start mapping out the urban reserves, where they lie out here, and then also the areas that are, I think there's some non-mapped areas, and I want to be able to relate the planning to the water service planning, if you might say. And the reason I raise this question is that the rural reserves are designed for a 50-year horizon. So, I mean, that's a long time if we're gonna go out there and build main transition lines. Water is war, but that line won't be used for rural reserves in terms of building capacity and development. So I just want to see those relationships visually a little bit more now, because this is an issue in my mind. It's a planning issue, and it affects the planning of the district in terms of what they can and cannot do.
When the Metro issued the urban and rural reserves back in 2012, I think it was,
Right.
or 2010, time's flying, but we did do a little bit of, or quite a bit of research looking at those, and at that time incorporating in looking at what those areas would be, the undesignated, the reserve areas. But we could certainly kind of resurrect that.
Could that be part of
discussion.
your preliminary planning now that if you go into this next fiscal year, you're going to do some preliminary engineering? Can you include that as part of your planning effort so that we understand how it works together?
I think so. I think
Can you,
that's a
can you say a little bit more about that, I'm not quite tracking?
Well, I don't know where the rural reserves have been mapped in this area. I mean,
Oh, you want to see the relationship?
I want to see the mapping that occurred, because what that means is the rural reserves are off limits for 50 years.
Right.
And if whatever our planning horizon is for transmission mains and funding and revenue sources and stuff, if, we're thinking, well, there may be annexations out there, there may be a failed planning assumption because they may be locked up for 50 years, so they may not be a revenue source for the district to grow.
Well, part of our strategy is not directly related to annexations and those issues. This is really a hydraulics issue for us to be able to close the loop.
No, I fully understand that, and my argument, and you know it, has been you put a water line out in the rural area, that's an invite to the development community, and the only thing that prevents that is the rural reserves right now. Certainly you can put in an 18-inch line for future capacity and everything else, but I think that the two issues need to be melded together a little bit during the planning process. I mean, we've kind of skirted the issue the last couple of years because it hasn't become a reality, but I think it will become a reality, even though it was a reality until it was challenged in court. I think it will be a reality. I mean, that's a 50-year planning horizon. Of course, things can change in 50 years, but it still is a planning assumption that has to be dealt with in terms of when you're looking for your revenue forecasting. You are going to have growth in this area. To what extent, I don't know. But as a planner, if you have water, you have development potential, and the idea is that it's in the right location. Is all I'm concerned with. So I'm just asking that we map it so that I can get a better visual. That's
So,
all.
Pat, I hear what you're saying, and my understanding is that these pipe sizes are determined on what the current zoning is. So we aren't building them for expected development. We're building them for what the current zoning is. So if it's, 1 house per 10 acres, the house is already there, the house is being served by water we purchased from South Fork. When we get some of these lines built, the house could also potentially be served by water from our plant instead of purchased water. And I think one of the issues that we have in the south side is we don't have sufficient flow with the existing system for fire flow.
Right. I personally feel that if the districts can be autonomous from Morgan City and South Fork, that it should have its own system.
Which is what we're really.
Right, and I think that connection makes sense.
Yeah.
And if they're gonna continue to play politics, then, you know,
Oh, well.
I'm tied to mine.
Exactly.
But I'm impressed that, you know, the water agencies in the Clackamas Basin are trying to work together and hopefully get over some of those squabbles. But I do agree with the connectivity, that's not my issue here. But
No,
anyway,
what
I
you're
think
saying,
we're
I was
talking
just-
about the planning over the next year, and I'm gonna have to pay more attention to it, I guess.
Yeah, I just wasn't capturing the essence of what you were saying, but I understand what you're asking.
Well, if you're in California, Mark Twain had a quote, and I can't quote it, but all it was is water is war, is the part I remember. Whiskey is for drinking, water
There
is
you
for
go.
war.
That's the one.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're not that far away up here in our area with the salmon conditions on the river, and there's already challenges to water rights. People are trying to suck it up, and
That will only continue.
I'm only hoping that there's enough conservationists out there to say, we're gonna stand up for fish too. If that happens, I mean, that water becomes war in the Clackamas Basin.
I had a pretty robust discussion today in Salem with Water Resources, DEQ, you know, and Oregon Fish and Wildlife about those issues and as it relates to the river. Oregon City doesn't want us to do this.
Well, yeah. Maybe we need to ask them their 50-year horizon too, in terms of their expansions.
Well, the dreams and reality don't match.
Let's not get any further sidetracked.
That's enough.
Good point. The last project I wanted to share was it's kind of an external and an internal mandate. Our line, this is again in the south side, Redland pressure zone. Our transmission line from our Redland pump station that runs up the hill, feeds further east. We've had quite a few breaks on that portion of the line over the recent past. The main two reasons behind that is because, one, it's an old line that's undergone some corrosion out there. Two is that we have very high pressures coming from the Redland pump station. So those two factors combine for the breaks. What we've done in as recent as last year, because we have a parallel line, 12-inch line running up the hill, it's a ductile iron line that was built much more recently, is in good shape, and we transferred services in this portion of along Redland for these few homes out here, transferred services from the failing 8-inch line to the newer, better 12-inch line. So this project will finish a connection at Niver Road off of Redland, and then allow us to completely abandon that portion of 8-inch that runs up the hill on Redland Road. The other component of this is because our breaks occurred over, a number of breaks occurred over a few years, damaged certain points of the paving on Redland Road. The county has asked us to repair that. We've kind of held off on doing that until now. And we said, hey, we can do this and kind of kill a few birds with one project, so to speak. So that's the goal and intent of this project. It's not quite $80,000 to do that work, and will allow us to finish up a project that began probably informally a year or two ago.
Do you still have access to an amplifier? Mine just stopped.
You can lower your hearing aids.
So that's really all I have to present tonight on the projects. Again, there's 9 projects on the list. Again,
She
if
can
you need
use a
more
headphone,
information on them,
like that.
there's more in the narrative.
Thanks.
in the
Put
binders.
new batteries
If you
in
want
it.
that, we're always willing to have additional discussion. But just ending with a few points that, what we're facing with the district is not unique to us. It's a common theme nationally. I'm sure most of you have seen the ASCE and other engineering, AWWA organizations have put out report cards or, state of the union, so to speak, on infrastructure, and it's pretty poor. And a lot of that is due to, of course, age of infrastructure. Water is no stranger to that. It's not out of sight, out of mind. When you put stuff in the ground, it has to be maintained, it has to be replaced over time. So just ending with a planned, balanced capital improvement program, again, ensures that we're providing the service we need to today, and we're taking into account the future as well. So, any other questions? Great, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Other comment on the capital improvement fund issues? Seeing none, let's take a 5-minute break. Provisionally set up, and everybody can stretch a little bit. Call the meeting order again. Ms. Wolfram has indicated that she has to take a break for a little bit, so she's been left, and she'll be back. She hopes. So we'll get to the record. Quorum of 6.
We have 7.
7.
You want to do it tonight?
I'd love to, but it depends on everybody.
Tax season's over, but it's still 7.
That's up to everybody, not me.
Okay, next on the agenda is general fund. Ms. Brick.
So just kind of looking over the general fund, under the general fund tab, we start with a summary. Again, we talk about the resources and we talk about the requirements. Most people are more familiar with terms like revenue and expenditures. Resources just include all the money that we have, and then the requirements could also be our requirement having any fund balance. We have included the decision packages, and primarily based on what I had said earlier about most of our budget is made up of external and internal mandates. The decision packages kind of make a big deal. These are areas that staff has thought would be a good place to spend our discretionary money that's in the budget. So we have provided a summary. If you look at page GF4 under the general fund tab, you'll see a summary that shows the current adopted budget that we're working under, the proposed budget without the decision packages, the dollar amounts of the decision packages, and then the proposed budget that includes the decision packages. Our proposed budget with the decision packages is a balanced budget. So we have equal resources and requirements, and we have sufficient revenue to cover the expenditures. And last year when we did this budget, the staff just said, here's our decision packages. We didn't prioritize it. The budget committee asked us to do that. So this year we've brought them to you in a priority listing.
Question? Other water providers around this area have been pledging to come up with their $25,000. Have any of them paid, and if they do, will it be run through our budget, or will it be run through independent budget?
Which 25,000 are you referring to? So,
Pardon?
which 25,000 is you referring to? Emergency. The emergency one?
Number one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let me bring the budget committee up to speed. One of the things that the CRW board had discussed and directed staff to do is to look at an emergency intertie for the Clackamas Basin, that we have a small intertie now, but it is not at the capacity to handle the needs or the requirements of the entire basin. And as you know, all sourcing from the Clackamas Basin, it's really essentially a single point of failure. situation, if there was a major event on the Clackamas River, everybody within the basin would essentially be in trouble if it was upstream of people's respective intakes. So the board directed me to go off and talk with the other water providers, or I think we kind of come to that conclusion that because of the size of this solution, it was going to be a regional effort. It couldn't be something that CRW should be doing on its own. So we did that, and each entity, and this is where Chairman Soa is asking the question from, has agreed to put up $25,000 toward the beginning of the planning and study of this inter-tie effort. Specifically, Chairman Stoa, we're not sure where we want that money to reside. And so until we continue those discussions and figure that out, each agency is holding their own $25,000. But they have committed in the affirmative to put the money up. And so
The board who will be part of that discussion.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that's happening is that they said, well, maybe the CRWP, the Clackamas River Water Provider, should be the holders of those monies, and we're not sure that's a good idea. They don't have that resource, I mean, or that capability. And so then we said, well, maybe we ought to create a third entity, but we haven't worked out the details. And so rather than just throw money, we're holding the money until we can figure those things out. And then we'll be coming back to each of the boards and conveying to them what it is and how we should be paying for it in terms of actually putting the money up.
Also, we create a new fund like we did for the water providers.
We could.
Yeah.
The other thing that, and that was the other reason why we didn't go through the CRWP, is they were immediately talking about, well, let's go out and hire a consultant and all this other kind of stuff. And we said, nonsense. We think that, first of all, if we take the plans that each of the entities have and pool those plans, that we have the technical talent in-house to at least do the first phase of that. We don't need an expert to do that. We have sufficient staff that can help us sort through that stuff.
Informationally, 10 years ago, there was a study done amongst the groups.
Which is some of the data that we're trying to
determine what was the capacity, because 10 years ago, they didn't know.
Yeah, we're somewhere between 20 to 30 MGD is what we've kind of said that would be our requirement. The other thing that we've done is we've talked with the city of Portland, Commissioner Humberson and myself have talked to Commissioner Fish and the water manager for Portland, because we also think that this also benefits Portland, and so we would be looking for them to put up their fair share of money as well. So that would be the other issue.
At that time, it was looked to tie into their Powview system and some other things, but the number you're talking about is not what we can produce currently.
So this would involve an arrangement with Portland,
It would
that they would also provide the 20 to 30 MGD if needed. Is that,
Well, the water
that would have to be worked out?
The water that we would need would come from Portland.
Yeah, so you have to work with them. So it's a big issue.
Right, it's a big issue, and it then provides to Portland, if they need water,
Right.
we can move the water in the other direction.
Just clarify one point, because I know sometimes the public goes, oh, we don't want to get involved with Portland or whatever. The idea is that it's an emergency intertie. It's not an issue of them supplying water for us on a regular basis or us to them, but rather if Bull Run goes down, we can help them, and if the river goes down,
They can help us.
they can help us. That's the point we want to make very, very clear. Nobody is looking to integrate the districts.
Would you mention just briefly about the vote that's coming up in a few days?
Oh, in Portland?
Might throw a monkey wrench.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I've read the initiative that Portland is dealing with right now. What that initiative is all about, because I think of citizens' frustrations with how the city has managed the revenues from the water district in Portland. The city is, or the voters have put together an initiative that would take the responsibility for the day-to-day management of water and sewer, actually, away from the city and put it into a special district. Now, it's ironic, I've had some communications with Portland because they've tried to use Clackamas River water as one of the reasons why a district is not a good idea. And I told Mayor Hales that, you know, politics are local and keep them local. That we're not in their fight, we don't want to be in their fight.
We got our own straightened out.
And our voters have taken care of our problem.
Exactly.
Which might be the possibility in Portland. So, that said, one of the things that I'm concerned about in that initiative, if it passes, is that it says that this new entity could not enter into any new IGAs with surrounding water districts. And if that happens, we would be blocked from entering into these agreements with the city of Portland. So that could be a problem. The other thing that is ironic, when we talked with Commissioner Fish, which I thought was an interesting a statement from a politician, quite frankly, where he said that if the initiative passed for the next 5 years, we'll be in court. Which means that the city is gonna sue the ratepayers, you know, over an extended period of time over this initiative, which I thought was ironic.
That's for Ken's benefit, that's typical Democrat move.
Couldn't resist, could you?
Question, would that prohibition on intergovernmental agreements, would that affect current agreements?
No, it just said any
New ones.
And we don't have an agreement with the city of Portland right now.
Right.
So, I think what the city has done, and I think wisely, has really kind of stopped any additions until this vote has actually been taken. They've done some other things that I'm not quite pleased with, but anyway, I think Chairman Sowell was just wanting to get that tidbit in there that there is a caveat that could be detrimental to us.
So I kind of like
I do have a question on your slide up there. Where's the city of Lake Oswego? Are they,
they have
or
not.
Westland, South Fork,
Yes.
but what about Lake Oswego?
Lake Oswego has not been involved in the conversations as of this time, as far as I know, is that?
They have attended the meetings, but they're not, they have created this relationship, as you know, with the city of Tigard.
Oh, yeah.
And which means that that's really an out of the region,
Yeah.
you know, outtake of the river, and it doesn't.
But
They are a member of the Clackamas River Water Providers.
Right, that's why I wonder, why aren't they participating? $25,000 for their project isn't.
They do have an intertie with Portland as they go north out of Lake Oswego, so they do already have an intertie that probably can't supply Ello and Tigard together, but that they have used in emergencies in the past. They've been able to get water from Portland.
One of the things that we.
It seems to me that if you're using water in the basin, you should be part of the discussion on emergency years. Even though you might have other independent sources like the Willamette River or whatever else that they're.
They were 10 years ago, but they're not now.
It's not that they've been excluded, it's a matter of their choice.
Well,
Their objective
that ought to be
with going.
discussed. I mean, he brought it up, the question, is everybody paying? And Lake Oswego is not paying apparently, is what I'm hearing.
They don't have under the present plans that they have a dog in the fight, in the sense that, which is one of the reasons why they went to Tigard, Because they basically said that if they didn't have Tigard, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. Tigard is essentially footing the bill for the bulk of what's going on.
So their emergency will be the Willamette River intake in Wilsonville, or?
No,
I'm not sure.
no, they have an intertie with the city of Portland, and then of course Tiger currently gets all their water from the city of Portland, so
Right.
they have an intertie with the city of Portland. So I guess they figure they're already covered on that side of the river.
Well, I think Tigard has also announced to the city that they're gonna cut their tie, the IGA that they have with the city, which is interesting, so.
Well, it expires in,
Yeah.
2016, yeah.
Yeah.
These days, the water is fighting.
Yeah, for fighting, yeah.
Adam, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna mention a point that, just to clarify, that we already do have an intertie with
Yeah,
Portland.
that's what I said, we had the
Okay,
small
you
ones.
mentioned that, okay. Thank you.
So I don't have an answer for your question, Pat.
So we do have 10 decision packages, and kind of as we did last year, you know, people have looked through the budget document. They might have certain items that they have questions on or not have questions. So if anybody on the committee has a particular item that they want to talk about, why did we include this, what are we thinking, anything like that, I would kind of like to just have the conversation.
I have some questions on number 3.
Okay.
With regard to, what, as I read it, I wasn't sure if it was a social media intended only, or if you were really using that for communication, or if you were using that for advertising, or if you just wanted to make the citizens more aware of the difficulties instead of doing all the inserts. I really didn't grasp the whole goal as I read the document.
Well, I think it's yes to all of the above except advertising. We would not be using this and are not using this for advertising. One of the things that has happened is that we've had a lot of negativity that has come down the stream. And we've had to try to reposition ourselves in terms of communicating directly to our ratepayers about what's real and what's Memorex in terms of a lot of the issues that have come up. And we've received a lot of positive feedback from the ratepayers because what we didn't want to do is fight in public. We just thought that was really bad form. So what we've been doing is sending mailers directly to the ratepayers without involving the world in our business, so to speak. And that seems to, we've gotten good bang for our buck on that. The other thing that has happened is that the board has expressed some concern that because we have put in place these rate increases over an 8-year period of time, that we need a better way of communicating to our ratepayers what those funds are for. And it's the information that we have provided thus far. Again, we've received a lot of thank yous from the ratepayers that we're letting them know what we're using the money for, what we're going to be using the rate increases from. This is an up to amount and not the amount of money that we plan to spend, but we thought we needed some money in the event that we do need to spend it or to continue in this effort, that the money would be there. Mailings are running, direct mailings, when we put those, what, about 3,000?
If they go in the bill, and if you have to mail them separately, then you've got the postage on top, so it's like 6 or
So
something.
is this intended to be an annual amount roughly? Or-
Yes. Yes.
So this is the new item, it's gonna be an annual
And-
project, and may go up or down depending on circumstances.
But not to exceed.
But
Right.
not to exceed.
And I think one of the comments in the justification is as we get better at some of the social media, which we are dipping our toe in now, that we will develop those skills in-house, and this number should go down over time, just because we'll be able to manage and create that content ourselves.
I gathered that it was a new direction, and I wanted to clarify to see
No, it's a good question.
if we were talking about 20,000 a year, or then go to 100,000 a year, or some other number.
No.
We don't have that much to say.
You know, on social media, like a teenager.
We don't
Toe in
have
the
that
water
much.
when the alligator snaps is more than just the toe.
We don't have that much to say.
Okay, that's the one question I had. Others have questions on these, because you're obviously discussing all 10 right now,
Yes,
so.
yes.
If you could,
Just a quick comment.
as you're asking questions, if you could identify which number you're talking about.
Okay. Quick comment, number 8, the hydro excavator. I've seen that in action in road work last summer near my street for a new stormwater line, and I can tell you that's worth every bit of it. So I definitely support that. And then the thing on the scanner is, SWA already have a scanner like this, or?
No, they don't. The scanner would be for our use to get documents, particularly some of the larger documents, into
Okay.
the document
So we're not
system.
repeating some resource
No,
that.
but we may actually be
Sure.
using that scanner and sharing it with Sunrise, and then they could contribute a portion of the cost.
I should add, just in case people don't know, that we have a mandate from the state of Oregon, the way we keep our records, and this is part of that mandate. Barbara?
I agree with Pat about that hydro thing. I had a house in Portland where I had to put in a sewer lateral, and it was from the street up a hill. And I had a rock garden and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, my gosh, it's just gonna be a horrible mess. They just zipped it right through.
Well,
They were right on.
well, one of the things that we're finding as well is that when we go dig now, there's a lot of utilities in the ground. And that if we do any damage to any of those utilities, particularly fiber optics or some of that stuff that's in the ground, we own it. And that can be a very expensive endeavor. And with this tool, you can get up close and personal, so to speak, without doing damage. And so we're going to try it. We don't know, and we want to get some history on this.
Yeah, I had called Carol today asking why we wouldn't just, at $50,000 a year, I'm thinking, why don't we consider buying one? What would one cost? And I guess it's around $250,000, which is only 5 years. But they have a plan, and I was going to ask Carol to simply share with everybody the plan that she shared with me this afternoon.
I can tell you what it is.
Or you, I don't care, but I mean, just because I thought it made sense once I heard it, you know?
Well, what we would be doing is, we would enter into a capitalized lease. Yeah, there's a few extra pennies that you're going to spend on that, but if we get to the point where we find that we're getting a positive return on investment, then we could convert, or we could roll that lease into a purchase. Normally you wouldn't do that, but this is something that we're trying. And if we can show a favorable rate, plus this is a piece of equipment that we intend to share with Sunrise, and hopefully the more we use it, the better payback that we're going to get. So, yes.
And happier customers.
We were talking earlier, you said if we purchased one of these things, nobody knows what the maintenance and upkeep of it is.
And so this would give us a track record. Quite frankly, most general contractors don't own all the equipment that you see sitting in their yards. A lot of it's leased. And so, we'll get a track record on this and determine whether or not it's going to do what we want it to do. We've heard a lot of favorable stuff, but we've also heard a few negative things. So we want to make sure, given the total amount of money that we're talking about, that this is a good idea. We think it is.
Other questions on the 10 decision packages?
I had one other on item number 10. It just seemed like $10,000 is a lot of money for a sprinkler system and some plants. Is that, you're going to go that high, or is that just a kind of a placeholder situation?
That's a placeholder.
Wouldn't anticipate actually going that high?
We haven't bid any of this work out, and as I kind of looked at this and thought about what we could do, I also think it would be a great opportunity to partner with an environmental science class from Clackamas Community College, have them come, help put the plants in and use some native plants that over time would require very little watering and very little other maintenance.
It's at a replace an irrigation system, and my personal opinion that one of the things that happens when you walk through a lot of our areas, it's not obvious that we're in the water business. And one of the things that CRBC came when they were talking about moving onto our property out on Roberts was to put some kind of an experimental feature there that would show conservation. And so it may be a good idea to practice what we preach, with all of that greenery we have out there. We might want to show some kind of experimental garden, some type to do that. So that it's a placeholder until we can figure out specifically what's the best way to go.
That and the media which Gary already talked about, that was all I had.
Any other questions on the agenda decision item? Okay. We'll move on.
Okay, so now just talking about the general fund in general, we have resources of $12,771,000, requirements of $12,771,000, so it is a balanced budget. The increase over the prior year, it's about $2.3 million, which seems like a lot, but again, we're not talking about an increase in expenditures of that, but simply an increase in the total budget for the general fund. So a portion of that is that we're increasing the transfer to the capital reserve. Again, that's the savings account. We're moving that up by $500,000 over what we provided for that fund this year. So this year the budget was $750,000. Next year is going to be $1,250,000 in the proposed budget. We also, because of the reduction in the reserves and system development charges fund, over the past few years, they have been paying a portion of the bonded debt. And this year, we're saying there's not enough money in the system development charges reserve fund to pay that debt. So all of the debt will be paid directly from the general fund. Well, through the revenue bond fund, but it will all come from the general fund. And then we've also got an increase in the beginning fund balance of $1.3 million. So we're gonna, where we anticipate landing this year, that goes up. So again, that's part of the resources, and that increases the overall budget. If we look at the general fund personnel services, we've got a slight reduction, and that is primarily due to a decrease in the PERS rate. We had budgeted last year for a higher PERS rate, and kind of right at the end of our budget process, there was Senate Bill 822 that reduced the percentage that we had to contribute to the PERS fund. And we have that same rate for 2 years. So that's one of the reasons the dollars in personnel services are down. We do have some employees that are eligible for step increases, and we do have some estimated increases in health and dental benefits. The Labor Management Benefit Committee is looking at our options for that and trying to mitigate that to the highest degree possible. We've got another meeting on Monday, and we do have some options that I think will work that can keep that kind of to a minimum. Another thing with the personnel services budget that gets a little confusing and convoluted is when we have staff working on capital improvement projects, their labor dollars get charged to the CIP. That makes it really difficult to look at personnel services year over year in the general fund, because there could be projects where they're using a lot of those resources for the CIP, and that becomes part of the cost of that project. Or there could be projects where we're not using as much of the internal labor on the CIP. Karen, where is the page with the total personnel? Is that in here, or did?
Oh, yeah, it should be right back under miscellaneous, page 6.
Yes. So if you look at miscellaneous page 6, you can see what the actual total cost of personnel services, but some of those dollars are gonna be contributing to the capital improvement projects and be capitalized as part of that. I don't know what that number was from last year. So, anyway, that's kind of the discussion on personnel services. We're not showing a lot of changes. We, as I said before, we are in the middle of negotiations. We don't know where that's gonna land. So we have kind of put aside a little bit that we, at this point, don't know how it will be distributed. In the materials and services, if you take out all of those, if we take out our one-time costs, the personnel services budget is about a 5% increase over the prior year. If you then take out our particular items that we just looked at, the decision packages, we've got about a 2.5% increase. As we were talking in the rate discussions, we talked about estimating a 2.5% increase in cost year over year. So when we take out those decision package items, we're maintaining that. The decision packages typically are one-time cost. So some of them are not, as we talked about. If we keep the hydro excavator, that could be a multi-year. The communication thing could be a multi-year, but many of those are one-time cost. And then we have capital outlay. And capital outlay are the items that we purchase that cost greater than $5,000. That's our threshold. And they have a longer life than 1 year. So it's something that we're gonna buy and we're gonna use for a while. What I've shown here is the list of the totals of the capital outlay dollars by year, and we usually do a 5-year plan. What you'll find is that when we look at this next year and we look at the items that are included in that $582,000, we'll probably change our mind on some of those things, and we'll move them further out. We'll say, well, we don't really need to replace this yet, so we'll move it out. But it gives us at least that longer-term view of we have equipment assets that will need to be replaced at some point in their life, and so we kind of line them out and we look at 5 years at a time, just so that we don't lose track of some of that replacement stuff that we might have to do.
Looking at the computer equipment on that graph, that $213,000 for FY15, how much of that is the billing system? Most of it?
130.
And then administration had another 50K?
There was 30,000, I know, in administration for HVAC replacement. I think we've got 6 units
No,
on the
I'm
road.
just talking about the
computer equipment.
I thought it was about 180,000 between admin and finance.
The finance is 130,000, and yes, there's a network upgrade in admin for 50,000. So that is
So
180.
approximately $23,000 more would be for other types of computer equipment upgrades?
I believe that we've got some in engineering
Okay.
for hardware and software, and then a full-size scanner, like the big plotter scanner that they use.
All right.
And
That answers my question.
so any other questions on capital outlay?
I'm looking at the big numbers. There's another big number in year 17, $288,000 for equipment and tools. Could you give us a kind of a rough idea what that might entail?
Well,
Just for information, those are on pages S2 and S3.
Okay.
That is an actual purchase price of a vac truck
Okay,
excavator.
right.
That's out there in 17-18. I don't know if that's like a placeholder in case we don't get the lease now and we're gonna wait and buy it, or if we do the lease and it works and we decide that we need another one. If we do the lease purchase, that number will go away.
All right, okay. I just wasn't, with this page and that thing, couldn't put them together.
I think there was a dump truck in there too.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I have a question on GF 23.
Yes.
Under personnel services, benefits and taxes, it goes from under $1,000 for benefits and taxes, like to $20,000. Why is that? Is that just a
Mr.
matter
Moore
of
asked me
not
the same
breaking them out the
question.
same way regularly?
Mr. Moore asked me the same question, Ken asked me the same question. What has happened is we used to take the numbers that went through the ADP system, and we would manually do a journal entry and take the percentage of the labor and the benefits and taxes and just lump it all in the salaries. Now we're using the ADP system to do that allocation for us, and it allocates everything. So if we say, for example, 30% of Mr. Moore's salary needs to go there, it's gonna take 30% of his salary and 30% of the rest of the components. And so that's why the budget looks different this year, but it's still pretty much the same.
Okay, that explains that. Where are the costs for commissioners' reimbursements, travel, training, and so forth, and legal expenses?
That's all in the Board of Commissioners, in the materials and services. The commissioner reimbursements are part of that salaries line.
They're part of the salary line?
Yes, and then, but then like the legal expense is under professional, well,
We don't have any.
they don't have any this year.
That is strange in view of the 16.
You've just never seen that before.
Are you figuring anything, maybe?
We do have, like, our regular ongoing legal activity is under the admin. We don't have anything specifically attributed to board activity.
You're not attributing it to the commissioners, those persons on these commissioners.
It's not these commissioners, and so it really becomes more of an agency expense.
Yeah.
Thank you. For a change.
So, I think maybe so far might be the better way to put it.
That's all I have.
Hopefully it'll stay that way.
You're being kind in Walter's war now.
Yes, that's exactly. Now we shall endeavor to persevere.
Questions on, have you finished your presentation, everyone? Questions on general fund, other than the ones we talked about already? Pat?
Well, like last year, there are things lumped together, and it's, it's kind of hard to figure out where things go. For example, Barbara's question there on personnel, but I went through each department, and I had some questions in my own mind, but, again, I look at the big numbers and say, okay, that's got all sorts of things in it. And I'm making an editorial. I think our other water providers in the Clackamas Basin do more itemization of their costs in their budget, and they do it in a different format, I think. You probably know more than I would on that, but I don't necessarily question any of these, as long as we have a board that knows these categories and the particular things that can go into them. When Mr. Moore comes in and says we've assigned it to this category, that's my only question, is the intent of the use of some of those larger categories. So other than that, I don't really have any particular concerns. I always like to know, for example, on administration, GF 31, page 31, there's an example of a lump sum professional contracted services, and this proposed here is $331,000. That's a lot of bucks.
Yeah.
And, I don't track those contracts that are underway, and the board does, and I assume you're comfortable with that $331,000 figure, okay?
So if you look at page GF 18, that tells you what's included in that category.
Okay,
So the
typical,
professional and contracted services is audit, contract work, which is another kind of catch-all, engineer services, legal, and math. So going back to GF 31, looking at what's included in that 331, The media communications dollar amount is included in there. We have a contract with Polar Systems, and they do the backup of all of our data. And so if we had a crash here, we have that data available to us elsewhere. So that's about 70,000 in this year, and it's because of the volume of space.
And that's
that
in
we
administration.
And that's in the administration,
Okay.
professional and contracted services. We have some emergency management cost in there. We have legal cost in there, and the legal cost is budgeted at 196,000 this year in admin, as it was last year and the year before.
Weren't there a couple studies underway, or?
We completed the FCS study and.
The FCS study is done, is completed. The study that we had on the, no, there was one that Suzanne was working on, that one's completed. That we
Well, I'm
had
referring to administration. That's all.
We don't have any money budgeted for any rate studies. We currently have an SDC study in process.
Would that be
And that would be, I believe that one's actually in my department.
Oh, I know the other one you're talking
No,
about
it's
is the
an admin,
compensation
it's an
study.
Yeah.
There was a
Yeah.
compensation
And so
study.
those are in the
Again,
current year.
I'm not concerned as much, as long as the board members are not concerned, and they know where these little project kitty holes are being placed in the budget. That's all. I just look at the big numbers, and are they transparent enough for board members?
And on the compensation study, we're hoping that we will actually share that expense with Sun License. So the last meeting, they indicated they had the same need, so we suggested that they discuss that with the general manager, and we can share that, and show that as a cost savings for both districts, rather than both districts paying twice to get the work done. So we do try to look at those kinds of cost savings approaches.
Other questions, Pat?
Thank you.
On that, others, questions? Mr. Fellow? I'd like to turn to page 29, page 29. I highlighted the original, the Oregon City right-of-way usage. When my rate hat went on, and my accounting hat went on, and I said, why isn't this in operation? Number one, from a cost of goods sold standpoint, because it's part of getting the water to those sections of the city. And number two, my rate hat went on because those rates are segregated as part of those costs, and wondering why it's in finance particularly. Maybe administration, but I didn't figure why finance.
We budgeted as part of assessments and taxes, and we had the discussion with the board and haven't, originally we were talking with the board about that just being an entire pass-through. So if we charged a ratepayer 32 cents for the Oregon City right-of-way usage fee, it would be a line item on the ratepayer bill, that money would come in, and so we would have a revenue line and the expense line. At this point, because there's some uncertainty about other entities that may choose to do the same thing, we're kind of holding off and basically just absorbing it as part of the, the cost of doing business at this point. But it's still kind of out there for discussion, I think, as we see what others end up doing, because we could get the same thing for Milwaukee and Happy Valley.
Is the number that was in the newspaper the number that's in the budget?
We have 10,000 in the budget.
That was my question. Originally, we thought it would be 15,000, but they were adamant that it was only 10,000 at our meeting in public.
Yeah.
Is that the number, 10,000?
That's what I'm gonna pay.
Thank you.
But it wasn't they, it was one individual.
It was one individual, but.
So we can't blame the whole.
Yeah.
Although there is an additional right-of-way fee that is buried in the rates from South Fork.
Mhm.
Because South Fork is being assessed the same right-of-way fee, but theirs is based on revenue, on sales. And so their number is significantly larger, but our portion of that is smaller, in the sense that, and that's what you've read about between West Lynn and Oregon City right now, because they didn't tell West Lynn that they were gonna be subject to the right-of-way fee.
Yeah.
And so,
That's a 40-year problem. Or however long they get. Okay, that was my question on that one. So that, for this year, that's where you've got it. That may change later.
and we've been notified by at least Happy Valley and the IGA that we had signed with them. They, we deferred that assessment. They agreed to do that until the recent court decision. That decision is now out. We have not heard from Happy Valley as to whether or not they're gonna move forward, although they've been very upfront about it, that it's gonna be a franchise fee versus a right-of-way fee. Distinction without a difference. And that fee would be at about 6%, I think is what they're telling us.
Is that still in violation of the Nike law?
No, the court decision says cities can do whatever they want because of at least home rule. And so because all of those things are still up in the air, there's enough uncertainty that we decided to do it the way that we're doing it.
Okay, so from that standpoint, I'm assuming you're not going to be able to charge us on anything that's under 212?
I can't hear you.
I'm assuming they're not going to be able to charge us on anything that's under 212? How would 212?
I'm not tracking.
Because it's.
Happy Valley is
They have-
annexed past 212, are they going to
Right.
try to charge us on anything under 212?
Well, it would be anything that is in Happy Valley's service area.
Well, that's state highway, that's why. he's
Well,
asking the question.
their intent is to go all the way to the river.
Oh, I know that.
And they've been very upfront about it, and if they can
They
get
want to
their
go all the way to
citizens,
Gladstone.
well, if they can get their citizens to go for it, and that's one of the things that we had in our discussions, that's really between them and their citizens as to where they're gonna go. And then we would be, and then the issue would be whether or not the area annexed would be in Sunrise's area or CRW's area. If it's in CRW's area, then we would be assessed the value of those services.
But I think, Gary, what you were saying is, if it's in the highway right away, that's a state highway, and so Happy Valley, that would not be Happy Valley right away.
Okay, that was my question in this one. So back-
What's it, 6% of what?
Gross.
Franchise
Gross.
Gross revenue
Within the.
within.
The service area.
Service. Yeah, that's the other thing that the city of Portland can use, because they have an 8% franchise fee on the water and sewer bills. In addition to what they do otherwise.
Well, and the other thing that we're learning is that they don't have to treat all government entities the same.
That is true also. That's true also. Okay, any other questions on general fund? Seeing none, are there any public that wants questions on the general fund? Okay, let's go to other funds.
Do you want to proceed, or? it's-
Well, I'm just showing these, so.
I'm
Is there some
fine
people
with
here
it.
that prefer not to?
I'll defer.
No, let's go.
Okay. Let's move forward then.
So the other funds that we have, they're all a little bit different. The only funds that have their own revenue would be the System Development Charges Fund and now our new CRWSC Activity Fund. Both of those funds have a revenue stream of their own. The other funds get their resources from transfers in, and often their expenditures are transfers out. So starting with the Capital Reserve Fund, we've got a beginning fund balance. We are transferring in, again, this is that savings account that I've been talking about. We're putting $1,250,000 in that fund. And we estimate that the fund balance will earn about $12,000 in interest earnings on their balances. The uses of that fund, we're gonna send $1,869,000 to the CIP fund to pay for those CIP projects that Adam was telling us about. And then we're gonna end up at the end of the year with an estimated about $2.4 million left over as a reserve in that fund for future expenditures. The CRWSC Activity Fund, this is the new fund that we just created this year, and this is a special revenue fund used to account for the activity related to the commission. And we will have the wholesale water running through that fund, so that's a revenue stream. And we also anticipate, and this 100,000 is just kind of a rough guess of the resources that we will be able to provide to Sunrise that they will pay for from CRW. And then we're gonna transfer some money in from the general fund to cover some of the administrative costs of operating the district, some of the costs that we'll be sharing. So on the expenditure side, we've got the materials and services where we'll be doing, we've got things like the audit, so the two entities will share the cost of the audit. We've got some liability insurance costs that we'll be sharing, and just a few minor things like that. And then we've got a computer equipment purchase, again, a placeholder on their side, that would be our share, so we put the placeholder on our side as well. And then when we get to the end of the year, the intent is to transfer those dollars from that CRWSC fund back to the general fund. And I see that Ms. Kemper has a question.
Yes, this 775,000, I assume that's from Sunrise for water.
Yes.
And then the 100,000. How does this compare with what Sunrise currently pays for water? How much did they use last year?
They are using very consistently the same amount that's in the agreement, which is 122. Rob, what's the agreement? I always say 2.5 million gallons a day, but it's really not. It's an annualized.
I mean in dollars.
122 million cubic feet. And so they use the same amount. Last year when we put the budget together, we did not budget this much for the wholesale water because we hadn't gotten the wholesale water rate yet. We do have that. So we increased the wholesale water rate by about 15 cents last year per 100 cubic feet. And so this is calculated based on that number with a very tiny like CIP adjustment to it. So that's the calculation of the volumes that they have agreed to times the wholesale rate.
But what about the dollars that they paid for the water last year?
I don't have all the numbers. I mean, we bill them every month. We bill them, you know,
Did
about.
you have a total for the year somewhere?
We're increasing the rate effective July 1st. But we did, we charged them 62 cents per CCF in this current fiscal year. The prior fiscal year, we were charging them about 48 cents. So that was the result of the cost of service study.
Okay.
Because remember on that, Barbara, before we were just doing a COLA. This year, we actually went through a rate study, and that's why you see.
And that's why it went up.
That's
Yes.
why it went up.
And that is the wholesale rate.
Right.
Yes, because it used to be about maybe 580,000, and now it's up in the, 750.
So just in case people get excited about it, we're not losing money. Okay.
No, it's based on the
Okay.
cost of service study.
We also have been at least advised, Rob and I talking with them, that they're having some problems with their membrane system. So it may be that will be asking for
For more.
additional water.
Yeah.
But we haven't crossed that bridge yet, so, but they've at
See
least
when
put us
they're
on
having
notice.
trouble.
They put us on notice.
Thank you.
So now moving on to the rate stabilization reserve fund. We have a beginning balance. We're gonna earn some interest. We are not planning on using any of that. This is again, we should, the revenues dry up, we can utilize this money to help us meet our debt covenants. And again, we have no plans on using that in this fiscal year. Then
If we borrow additional money to do some of our projects, then the rate stabilization fund will have to be increased.
It depends on the debt covenants. Typically, having a rate stabilization fund is not necessarily a requirement, but if it is, we would certainly meet that requirement. And it's my belief that it's prudent to have a rate stabilization fund, and if we borrowed more money, you know, currently we owe less than $2.7 million total outstanding on our previous debt. If we were to borrow more money, I think it would be prudent to increase the dollar amount that's in that rate stabilization fund. So if you look at the SDC reserve fund, we're using a lot of that SDC money this year on the capital improvement projects. So we're starting off with a pretty small beginning balance. We have estimated a little bit higher this year on SDC inflows. Based on what we're seeing this year, we're already at like 130.
183.
So
I noticed that.
Yeah. So the SDC revenues are coming in nicely this year, so we did bump it up, but not too aggressively. We don't want to count on that and then find ourselves falling short. And the plan is to send about $430,000 to the CIP fund for use on appropriate CIP projects, and then leaving a reserve balance of $111,000.
Carol, can I ask a quick question? I know Sunrise had budgeted, I think it was 230 SDCs, and they've hit 400 and anticipate going even higher. Do we have any sense of when that means they will want to purchase more water from us to service those new connections? And any sense of what that might mean to us at this stage, or is there a way to find out?
Not
Sort of
at
a
this
big picture
point,
question.
And I think a lot of it is, we've got the contract between NCCWC and us that we actually supply water to Sunrise, and then they also have a contract with NCCWC. So, you know, they have options of where to get that additional water to serve those additional customers. And until they don't have options to get it somewhere else, they, you know, so it'll.
So we don't know what this.
That's a future thing.
Okay.
And then related, you know, those numbers to our numbers, you know, we don't have that kind of development potential based on
No, I
the
understand
current
that,
zoning and
but I
that
thought,
kind of stuff.
okay,
Yeah.
you know, we've set aside 10 million gallons a day as part of our reserves for them to purchase if they need it, and I was wondering if that speed of increase in their SDCs might, at some point, have them tapping into that 10 million gallons a day, which would be increased revenues to the district.
Right.
And I just-
Not enough to count on in the near term.
Okay. It's a long term, more of a long term.
It's more of a long-term
Okay.
reservation, I think.
And I think it's probably sooner now than we would have thought in 2009 or 2010, but I
Still
think
it's
there's
out
still, yeah, it's still down the road.
Thank you.
One of the things that Sunrise has is that a lot, when the economy went south, a lot of they had built out their infrastructure on the come. And so I'm surprised that they're getting the kind of return on their SDCs that they are. But essentially, a lot of large developers came in and bought up those abandoned projects that were already metered and everything else. And so I suspect that I've been talking with Wade over there, that a lot of their new development is really developers coming in and building on the existing infrastructure. It's a good deal.
But at some point, that's gotta help us. Just, it's further out than I thought it might.
Well, I think of all of the water districts within the basin that is likely to have expansive growth, Sunrise is probably number one.
Okay.
So then moving on to the revenue bond fund. We do have a beginning fund balance in the revenue bond fund and maintain an ending fund balance as well, and this is part of our debt covenants. The bondholders had asked when we got the bonds, or I guess it was the refunding in 2009, that we keep a balance in there equal to the final payment. So the payment this year is $455,555. It's all being funded from the general fund instead of split with the SDC fund. And after making the principal payment in November, the outstanding balance on our bonds is $2,430,000. And that's all of our funds.
Questions, other funds? Barbara?
I have some questions on page OF 5 in regard to the revenue bond fund. I was trying to track all of these and having a little bit of difficulty. Let's see, 476,000. For proposed 2014-15, there's a beginning balance of 476,000. But there was, at the end of our adopted 2013-14, there was 493,036. And generally, those have tended to be the same amount.
Right, and that's the budgeted numbers, and we never quite know what the reserves are gonna be, you know, what the interest is gonna be and that kind of stuff. But yes, it doesn't, because you look at the end of actual 2012-13, we had 475, 480, but we started the adopted budget with 468. We can take a look at that and see if we need to adjust that beginning balance.
So that amount was adopted for 2013-14, but you figure it's going to be less.
We'll take a look at that.
But you're proposing 476,000, so that's what you think you'll need.
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
Other questions on other funds? Okay.
Quick question on the SDCs. Where's most of that payment coming from? Industrial additions or residential? We've seen some pretty large industrial activity going on, so I'm assuming that's where it's coming from. But
we've had several large meters go in, a 4-inch, and a couple 2s. Those are pretty substantial. And then we've had filling meters.
okay.
So I'd say about 50-50.
And as far as number
of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked the question is that it looks like our customer base is pretty stable. I mean, it's not really changing. In fact, it kind of goes up and down a little bit.
Yeah.
So my question is, where are we going to get SDCs if we're not increasing our customer base? And to me, the potential area is redevelopment, reinvestment in the Clackamas Industrial Sanctuary area, maybe more along 82nd Drive and 82nd Avenue around the regional center there. So it seems to me that part of our long-range planning is looking at where we think these SDCs might come from, because it's probably not going to be residential, unless we get condominium towers over there by the regional center or something, but
We haven't seen that.
not yet. We should, but we haven't.
One of the things that we are seeing and have had some additional inquiries is individual metering of businesses at Clackamas Town Center. So they may have one big meter for something, and then somebody changes a use and they decide that they would rather have their own meter.
I see.
And so we're seeing that's where some of that money's coming from, and it doesn't really change, you know, the customers, you know, it adds like one customer, but, you know, they're paying the SDCs for whatever size meter and service they need.
I talked to the property manager for Clackamas Town Center. I ran into her a couple of weeks ago. And what she told me was the development company that owns Clackamas Town Center is short of funds. And so what they're trying to do is raise money, and they're allowing a lot of their anchor tenants to kind of go off on their own meters, and so in order to raise more money. So they're selling those properties.
If somebody's receiving water from a large pipe, and they decide to have their own meter, then we charge an SDC.
If it's a new service, we do charge an SDC.
Comes up as a new service. But it's a wash on the amount of water used, so it's.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I had one other question that I missed here. Comparing OF5 with A9, for the fiscal year 13-14 adopted budget. The total resources on one page are $1,129,685, and on A9, they're $939,496, and the same for the total requirements.
Did you repeat yourself?
That was page OF5 and A9, revenue bond fund.
The adopted budget numbers are different.
Fiscal year 2013-14 adopted budget. It's $1,129,685.
It should be the $939,496.
$939,496 on the
Yeah.
other page. It's about $200,000.
We'll have
Not
to
quite
read that
that.
page. It's the $939,496 on the LB 35 report is the correct number.
So where did the other one come from? Is it an addition?
It's an error.
Yeah, an addition error, I didn't have a calculator handy, so that's what I was wondering. Okay. Bad computer.
Carol? I'm sorry, did we correct that one typo also between page BM4 and BM5?
I did not hand out new pages.
Just let everybody know.
This is kind of our working document here, so if you see anything else, please let me know. But on page, in the budget message, page number 5, the water sales wholesale, we had 795 on that page, and it should be 775.
Other questions or comments on other funds? Is there any public comment on other funds? Seeing none, let's ask the question. We've been going for 2.5 hours. Do you want to continue and do the discussions and voting, or do you want to postpone it to the next scheduled
Do
meeting?
we have a form, do we have our required
Do we
voting
have
number?
required voting numbers here? So,
Speaking for myself, I'd like to at least take a vote on it, see where we are.
We have one commissioner that thought he would be here for the second
Yeah.
thing, so we'll just remind him that.
Yeah, I think that's
Will
what
that
the
be an
public
issue?
thought too. The public thought that the next meeting would be more robust discussion.
If that's,
Well, it's always good to sleep on it, right?
well, we can do that
Last week.
if you want to. That's the reason I'm asking the question. Because we've been here 2.5 hours, we could probably finish it in another 20 minutes, be done at 9. Or we could just go to the next meeting.
You guys are the committee, so.
So that's why I'm raising the question. I have one item I need to discuss. It won't take too long, but that's why I'm quizzing the committee. What's your feeling?
I move we recess.
he would like to recess. Yeah, why not poll the board?
Okay.
I'm not
Let's,
heavily invested, I just,
let's do that. Karen, would you please pull everybody? Make that a roll call.
vote or move forward. Wait till the next meeting.
So that's the question?
Okay, I won't be at the next meeting, but there'll probably still be a forum.
Quorum constitutes 6.
Yes. And then requires a unanimous vote.
Yes, required unanimous vote.
Okay,
Yes.
Pat Russell?
And there's-
I'd be offensive.
Is that abstaining?
I've always said to myself, on an important decision, you always sleep on it, but it's one less meeting to go to, so. Hearing some concern about adjourning, I would support adjourning.
Well, if there's 2 members that want to adjourn, it'd be pretty difficult to get.
We are not going to get it.
yeah,
Sufficient,
adjourn.
not to adjourn.
Recess.
Okay, let me bring up my
That's
item.
right.
Point taken.
Let me bring up my item then.
All right.
And I note in the budget document, and it's been in policy for years, to keep that 90 days of working capital. that 90 days was set when we billed monthly. So that constituted 3 billing cycles. Okay? It's still at 90, and we're doing every 2 months, which is a billing and a half cycle. My cash flow head says that we ought to consider moving that to 120 minimum, just because 1.5 is a hard deal to cover without emergency borrowing kind of thing. So I suggest to the staff that for next year, not this year, for next year, you consider something like that. I know that will have rate effect, it'll have budgeting effect, but I just suggest consider that. So. And what's the other item?
I'll always err on the side of a bigger savings account.
That's a board policy.
Yeah. Okay, no, that was all I had. That covered the other items. So the next meeting then will be, according to the schedule, will be the 15th, my recollection, at 6 o'clock in this room. 15th. Okay. Have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to recess.
Recess. Any opposed? Seeing none, we're recessed until the 15th.